Why don't we get started on this week's The Places We'll Go show? And quite honestly, I am super excited to be talking to this very special guest, Ollie Barrett, this morning. Now, look, let me give you a little bit of an introduction to Ollie. And quite honestly, I love the headline. I have no idea how he claimed the title of being the Britain's most connected guy. No idea how that happened, Ollie. Maybe you could tell us. But above and beyond that, Ollie is just a fantastic gentleman, probably one of the most humble people that I know. He's done so much in his life, and I would say started off quite unconventionally, having been a dropout of both Leeds and Edinburgh. But more so than that, clearly picked himself up and was able to really forge an entrepreneurial career, quite unique in many respects. From starting the UK's largest schools enterprise competition, Tenor, to currently create, or his current sort of passion is to help the champion children's literacy with an initiative called TOTS, or Turn On the Subtitles. It's such a fantastically simple idea, which is gaining a whole lot of traction, particularly within government. So I'd love to hear a bit more about that as well, Ollie. He was one of the founders of Startup Britain as well, for which he got his MBE. So another great talking point there. And then, above and beyond all of this, he is on the advisory board of a number of different companies or charities or social enterprises, one being Founders for School, the other being the Marketing Academy. So with just so much going on, it's just a privilege to be able to speak to Ollie about his journey this morning, some of the highs and lows, ups and downs, and perhaps some of those stories behind all the successes that you've had, Ollie. So it's an absolute pleasure to welcome you on this morning.
Thank you,
I'm now going to pass. Absolutely, I'm going to pass on to Mark now to kick us off with the first question.
Thanks, Richie. Morning, Ollie. Morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Fantastic to have you on. So many things to talk about, but to get us started, Ollie, tell us, where are you and how are you in early 21?
Yeah, well, in early 21, thank you so much for having me, Mark, and congratulations both on the show. I think it's terrific. I've absolutely loved listening to it in the run-up to today. I'm at home, like so many of us. I'm in the south of England during what's become known as Lockdown 3, and I am keeping my spirits up, Mark. It's January, so we have to really push. It does feel like a slightly odd moment because back last March, I had so many colleagues in the live event world that were putting stuff in the diary just in case. Optimism prevailed. Maybe in September, maybe in October, we'll do this. And I've got to be honest, despite my own positivity and yes, in many cases, optimism, that diary is not filling up in the same way. It really does feel like people are sort of pushing through these few months as best we can together. And that's why doing what you're doing this morning by connecting people is so important.
Ollie, thank you so much for that. And look, it's an absolute pleasure to have guests on like you to help support and add value to what we're trying to do here. Ollie, I have to pick up on what perhaps is a fantastic personal brand that you've carved out through the years. And in fact, Ollie has just launched this amazing course on the art of networking and building connections. So you must go check that out. But one of the things that Ollie talks about is this need or ability of all of us to create and forge greater connections, which has earned Ollie the title of probably being a very super connected individual. How did that happen? What are some of the motivations behind that, Ollie? And perhaps you can give us a tip or two if people are thinking about forging connections in the current circumstances.
Well, how it happened, and I should address the fact that that particular title of Most Connected wasn't one that I had called myself. Very generously, Wired magazine, when they launched in the UK, were intrigued by my web of connections and some of the wonderful people I got to hang out with. And they did a piece and that became the title. It is genuinely my love in life to meet people from all industries, from all backgrounds, be it education, politics, business. And as the years roll by, I guess I noticed that they want to meet each other and they want to learn from each other. And so really that's been at the core of everything I've done. How can I spot and how can I make a life-changing introduction? I really do think of it like that. So every morning I get out of bed and I think, could I put someone together today that could really help another person? To answer your question, Richie, how that started, after I dropped out of Edinburgh, I was only there, unlike you, for a term. And I dropped out and I was feeling a bit glum and a bit uncertain about the way forward. And to cut a very long story short, a family friend said, you should go and become a Butlin Redcoat. Now, forgive me if that doesn't resonate with our colleague in Perth this morning. But what they knew was Butlins was a holiday resort in the UK where the Redcoats, the hosts, all day, every day, and all night sometimes, met the other guests. And I think he slightly stitched me up by knowing he would throw me in the deep end. And that's what it did. And for better or worse, I emerged absolutely changed. I loved it. And it just gave me, and I should say I'd done a 6-month stint at Disney World before that, which also changed the way I felt about meeting strangers, if you like, just going up to people and having conversations. So I was already waking up to that a bit. Anyway, after the Butlins experience, I just felt more confident as I went into the business world, getting a group of people to do something a bit different. And that emerged as what was essentially a bit of a parlor game, speed networking. And it sounds pretty awful at any time of the day, especially first thing in the morning. And what it was saying, let's talk to each other for 3 minutes each, and I'll blow a whistle. And at the end of it, people would come up and say, well, that sounded horrific. However, it was great. And it just gave me that quiet confidence. This is 15, 20 years ago, that if you create the conditions for people to bump into each other, amazing things can happen. And I guess it's that belief that sort of ended up evolving. And before I knew it, people were inviting me to host events for them. And I've sort of tried to, rather than keep my head down, sort of keep my eyes open and around on all the room or across the street or whatever it happens to be, just spotting people and thinking what connections are out there to be made. So hopefully that traces a bit of it.
So Ollie, life-changing introductions, there's a huge amount of generosity in there, and clearly you come across as somebody very optimistic, positive, very generous. I'm curious to know whether you think that's innate in you, or the Butlins experiences and others since created that or augmented it. Do you think that you were always going to be the type of person that you have become, or was it those specific moments?
I think I was unbelievably fortunate that my family was a very hospitable family, quite literally in terms of hospitality, hotels, catering, but also with a warm welcome for friends and so on. And so very early on, I wanted to look after people in that sense, try to make them feel comfortable, try to make them feel welcome. Even when I did work experience at the BBC on Esther Ranson's chat show, my job was getting someone a coffee in the green room, and you were banned from talking about what they were there to do. Your question is really important to me, though, because absolutely, I think that's grown and evolved, particularly because it ended up becoming quite self-fulfilling. And what's the word? There were so many paybacks, Mark, because when you make a brilliant introduction, it feels amazing. It really feels fantastic. And that just encourages you to do another one, either for that person or for another person. Also, when you become known as a helpful introducer of people, guess what? People want to make helpful, useful introductions for you. So the whole thing has a bit of a snowball effect. It's definitely developed over time. And part of the reason I love being involved in events is you get to dip in and out of so many industries. So my mind is buzzing with potential connections.
You know, Ollie, you and I probably met the best part of, 4 or 5 years ago, where I actually heard you talk and then we connected thereafter. Yeah. One of the things that inspired me most about that talk at that point in time was your thoughts around the long shot connection, and how you foster connections with people that are way out of your reach, that you would never have even fathomed being able to do that. Can you elaborate a little bit about that? Because I've been doing that ever since, and it's a brilliant technique. And love for you to elaborate and tell us maybe a story or two about how it worked for you.
Yeah, well, this is controversial because many people will tell you that you should never cold call. You must always go through a warm introduction, and don't even think about writing to an organization without someone in common and so on. And I absolutely don't believe that, and I never have. I think if you can send a well-timed, well-crafted, succinct, personalized, deliberate note, amazing things can happen. First got onto it. I started my first company at Leeds, or rather, it was Leeds University, having dropped out of Edinburgh. I was a student. I knew I wanted to host events, which were the Alternative Careers Fair. Had no clue how to advertise them. I wanted to use the name of famous people on the poster. I should have gone to the School of Marketing, Richie, had it existed. I only knew one name in the world of advertising, Saatchi and Saatchi, and I called them up through directory inquiries. And bizarrely, I got through to the global marketing director, and he took my call. We had an amazing conversation. It led to him saying, "Okay, who are you?" And I had to confess, I'm a student. I'm just getting started. He asked me into his office the next week. That led to meeting their clients. It led to investment in the first business, and it led to what's now a 20-year friendship. And it just sowed the seed that if you don't ask, you don't get. Very often you'll get ignored. So I've got lots of thoughts about why you should follow up and try again. I've got lots of thoughts around the fact that nobody in 20 years has ever told me off in terms of saying, "How dare you write to me? This is outrageous." And I just think people should try it more often. And the only other thing I'd bundle in there, Richie, and we can unpack anything you like, is very often all I'm doing when I send a note, and I send them still every single week, actually. I sent one last night to a couple of people in the US. Very often, initially, I'm just noticing what they do. I'm just saying, "Dear Mark, forgive the note from out the blue. I thought what you'd done recently with Direct Line, and by the way, it has to be 100% sincere. I've never said anything in those emails that I don't genuinely believe." And you just notice what they're doing, and you'd be amazed at the responses you get. So for me, I still get excited when I talk about it because it opens a door that a lot of people assumed was locked.
It's I fundamentally believe in that. I think there's a couple of things that are important there. One is your infectious nature will get people to want to do that. I think there's just something in that chemistry there. But also, if you catch people on the things that they're really passionate about. So my advice when people are seeking mentors is actually to get a broad range of advisors and say to people, "I saw you present, you were amazing. I'd love to know how you do it. Can I buy you a coffee?" And you're not saying, "Please be my life mentor forever." It's just, it's accessible. But in doing that infectious nature, maintaining that sort of energy and cadence, how do you do that? Does it take its toll? How do you look after yourself in that regard?
Well, first of all, I'm happy we're on the same wavelength about it. I'm a great believer, and this does relate to your question being directly answered. I'm a great believer in switching the channel if you can't get face-to-face, which is very topical. So if it isn't a face-to-face coffee, is it 10 minutes or 5 minutes on the phone? Is it 3 questions over email? Are there ways to flip the channels around so that some sort of connection emerges over time? And that relates because for me, my New Year's resolution, we're recording in January, or certainly one of them, and forgive me if this sounds self-indulgent, is to be a bit kinder to myself. Because I try to be positive and kind and helpful to other people, but I can be unbelievably tough on myself and really tough on myself. And, although I'm very proud of all the ventures that I've created and co-founded and are still going, very often I relate to Churchill's saying, success is the ability to go from failure to failure with no loss of enthusiasm. And what I mean by that is, I don't consider the ventures, Clean and Cool, TOTS, Startup Britain, Tenor, lots of others besides, I don't consider them in any sense to be failures. I consider my own role more often than not to be a failure. Because I'm often transitioning and segueing between and onto the next one. Some sort of Littlest Hobo images coming to my mind for some strange reason. The answer to your question is, I understand the link much better than ever between my mental and my physical health. So I force myself to get outdoors. Much more and more I'm walking and talking, not always to myself, but flipping calls to the phone. I find fresh air, the great outdoors, an unbelievable healer. You won't find me padding around in my bare feet in the forest at the moment, but I think it's crucial. And the second thing, Mark, is I change how my day starts and finishes. My intention this year is to have a digital sunset as often as possible, not every day, but that means no screens, mobile, web, and TV, which is the toughest one of all sometimes, from about 9:30. Don't achieve that every day. Beat myself up when I don't sometimes, but have to let myself off. And how I start the day. I absolutely don't check my feeds, my news, my everything else until that first cup of tea, until I've had a bit of a plan on a white piece of paper. So I'm throwing out a few ideas. The other one, which I must say, is I have been unbelievably lucky to surround myself with what I call a kitchen cabinet, which is mates, friends, colleagues, loved ones, friends who I can go to and say, I've had a shocker. I'm really upset about this. I've really been let down by this. And it's like a force field. I wouldn't be able to do anything without them.
I tell you what, Ollie, you've certainly coined a new phrase in my books, the digital sunset. I pretty much have to substitute my sundowners for the digital sunset now. So it's a new way of thinking about it, I guess. Ollie, you have been the second person on the show who's dropped out of Edinburgh and gone on to do some absolutely phenomenally amazing things. Maybe I should have too. Maybe that's the lesson that I've taken from this morning. No idea. But the thing is, it must have been incredibly hard back at that point in time to be able to find your path. And I'm sure there must have been a lot of soul searching that went on, a lot of unconventional sort of time spent taking chances. How were you able to forge that perhaps in the early days? And maybe reflect on maybe one or two of the tips that you could give others who are maybe struggling at this moment in time.
Yeah. So I went to university, to be perfectly honest, because it was what everyone else around me was doing. I didn't understand that there were many paths to success, nor did I genuinely feel that you needed a degree to be successful, which of course you don't. Had I known about other concepts like maybe apprenticeships, although I can't quite imagine that path either. I'm quite conflicted, Rishi, about my university experience, because on the one hand, I dropped out twice. On the other, it's where I met some of my lifelong friends. It's where I discovered my love of radio and broadcast. It's where I produced my first show, which led to my love of making things happen, which led to the formation of my first company. So I've got such mixed feelings. Fundamentally, university probably needs a redesign, but that's not the point of this question. I was unbelievably fortunate that I had and have loving parents who backed me, not financially, but by saying, whatever you think is the right thing, we're here to support you. And I can't underestimate the power of that coming from a parent to a child. And as a dad now, I see that very clearly, that belief, that support, right? I was lucky enough to have had a peep on the other side of the wall. So I'd got some experiences and some internships with Hit Entertainment on the launch of Bob the Builder, at the BBC working on Crime Watch. And having had a scurry around what was going on outside the castle walls, I could see it was going to be all right. And I could have that reality check that I wasn't going to be left adrift. That didn't mean I was leaving Leeds or Edinburgh with some sort of, I'm going to be some huge success or anything like that. But I think being able to see people face to face and just have that time with people to realize it was going to be okay. The other thing, to be perfectly honest, was reading, whether it was snippets of news articles. There used to be a column in the Sunday Times called How I Made It. Not a particularly nice phrase, but it was just about real people and the journeys they'd had. I'm looking at a book at the moment. Martin Lewis, the newsreader, not the money-saving expert, wrote a book called Reflections on Success. And it's just loads of people from all walks of life saying what success means to them. And it just gave me that sort of sense that it'll be all right. And there is a way through. So I'd encourage everyone to believe that it will be all right. The world is full of people who want to help you, who want to give you a hand up, particularly in 2021, who will make some time available for you. So all of that helped enormously. By the time I dropped out of Leeds, I had started my first company with my co-founder. We were employing over 200 people and we were running events in 9 cities. So it was a different sort of transition.
Awesome. So,
you've achieved so much. It's fair to say. I think we've probably only scratched the surface, and so huge amounts to be proud of. But I'm sure you've had some stumbles, and really had to dig deep. So, what are some of the low points that you've had to bounce back from?
So, I mean, honestly, constant. In any given month, I think the thing is, I go back to that kitchen cabinet analogy of, being surrounded by supporters. The first business we started, we were being patted on the back at a very young age, saying, how does it feel to be millionaires, which of course we weren't. But it looked hugely successful. And the reality was, we didn't really know how many well, I didn't really know how many beans made five at that point. We ended up not in any way making this a success of the business. And the office, to give you an example, Mark, was repossessed. I never saw those books, those computers again. The business went bust, and I let down a huge number of people. I feel absolutely gutted about it to this day. Some investors, many of whom we managed to keep good relationships with, but also team members. You know, everyone was paid, but it was humiliating. It was embarrassing, you know, it was just, you know, it's a sort of thing that will knock you at that early stage in your career. When we launched Startup Britain, we launched it with number 10. It was off the back of a totally random coffee with Lord Young, David Young, and literally 4 weeks later, we were launching a national campaign with the Prime Minister. I remember checking Twitter the night we launched it, and there were a number of tweets which are frankly unspeakable on any show, especially this. But my favorite hashtag was deport them all, about all of the co-founders of the campaign, deport them all. And there was such rage and anger. Now, when I say it this morning, it sounds like, it's a Twitter storm, deal with it. But actually, facing such, and by the way, huge positivity from other parts of my, parts of the world, parts of my network, I think we were doing a good thing. But just realizing that whenever you do something in the political world, and that's why now I'm fiercely apolitical, and whenever you do something in the political world, there will be people not just who want to put you down, but for so many people who want to kill you, and that is a horrendous thing. So so even just having a glimmer of that, I found unbelievably demoralizing. Made me maybe want to run a mile from the intensity of party politics. And then I would just say, you know, last March, and forgive me if this is a tiny example for someone tuning in, last March, you know, I was carving out 90% of my work in live events, emceeing, going around the world, going around the country. 90% of that disappears. Well, if it wasn't overnight, it was within 2 days. You know, and so having to, you know, and everyone's had to do this in their own different ways. But the idea that the spring in the step is a constant would be a total misreading of the situation.
Do you know, Ollie, the fact that, I guess, you know, the trials and tribulations keep coming, and they keep coming for all of us. And what I loved about the sentiment was sometimes when people are looking as a outside in, it looks all groovy. But actually, when you're on the inside, things may not be as what it seems. And I think that's a massive lesson for a lot of people in today's sort of world and social media sort of climate. I'm going to take a couple of questions from the audience. I've got a lovely one from Belinda, who asks, who is the one person that you would like to meet now? And following on from that, I'm going to get a couple of cheeky ones in. Matt asks about what are the 3 non-negotiables for networking? And then finally, Raju asks, how do you manage to network a group of varied people? You know, how do you get around the room, perhaps?
Well, oh, right. Okay. So I'm gonna I'm gonna start with the final question. You know, and this sort of advice probably needs to be updated a bit. I mean, by the way, throwing questions into a live event can be an amazing way to strike up. I've been focused on the two of you, I must say, but I'm conscious of that. But I think asking interesting questions is such an important thing in life. One of the challenges with CVs and with LinkedIn is it only really talks about our today and our yesterday. And what's really interesting, if you want to collaborate with someone, is you need to get them talking about where they want to go. So that would be my number one tip when you meet somebody. First of all, never ask somebody what they do. What do you do? Dreadful question for lots of reasons. Ask them something else like, what's keeping you busy? Much better turn of phrase. Gives them the opportunity to talk about, you know, redoing a bit of their house, about something at homeschooling. Keep it light if they want to, or they can tell you their latest career news. Let's imagine we're now back in the world of face-to-face events. The number one thing you've got to get good at is politely and positively saying goodbye to people. Yeah, you don't have to get stuck. It's not offensive to say, Richie, it's been lovely meeting you. I hope to catch up with you later on in the event. Being able to cut off a conversation. And I think in 2021, having the confidence to call for, not to shorten a call that was supposed to be an hour into 5 minutes, but to call for a 5-minute call, to call for a 10-minute Zoom, and to have that sense of brevity and momentum, but particularly in a live events environment. My other tip, and forgive me if this is hopelessly out of context because we're locked down and not being face-to-face, but the technique I've used in dozens and dozens of events, when I get to the event, I greet the people on the front desk with the badges and the lanyards. I say, thank you for having me. And I ask them if they can point out our host. The host is the person whose name we would more often know. In this case, if this was a real event, it would be Richie and Mark. Where are Richie and Mark here? And they would maybe for the first time would be pointed out to me. I then make a beeline at some point for Richie and or Mark. I keep it brief, I keep it sincere and complimentary. Thank you for having me. I'm Ollie Barrett. This is a brilliant gathering. Who else is here? Okay. You're then 2 steps later and Richie and or Mark have pointed out characters, stars, people they have affection for within the room. That simple hack has led to me meeting hundreds of interesting people who have changed my business life. So there's the hack. Don't be afraid to ask the hosts who's in the room. And I think you can do that virtually in other ways as well.
I'm not letting you get away with the Belinda question. Who's the one person you still want to meet? But by the way, that was phenomenal advice, by the way. I love that. But moving on, who's the person?
Well, funny enough, I'm very interested. I mean, the very obvious one would be someone in the incoming US administration. I would say, but I don't think they'd be top of my list, to be honest. I'm fascinated by people like, people who have achieved extraordinary things. Steven Spielberg, I'd love to meet face to face. I'd love to meet, I'm not comparing him in the same sentence. Sorry, Tim Davie, the new Director General of the BBC. I think the BBC's got a formidable opportunity to forge meaningful connections. And I'm very interested by what they're doing in the world of education. I'd have to say though, my my one at the moment, because as you know, if you turn on subtitles for kids telly, you massively improve their reading. So if we can get the world's #1 broadcasters and tech companies to turn on the subtitles by default, we will change the world. It will be the biggest literacy project in the history of the world. So my top choice would probably be Susan, who runs YouTube, because although they're on the path to doing this, I want her and others to inspire their peers around the world to say, this is a no-brainer, let's all get on board.
Yeah, very good. No, it's such a simple and brilliant initiative. Columbus has had to leave us. She apologizes. She's had to start online school lessons. This is the world we are in, isn't it? But I'm going to jump to Phil's question because Phil's asked a biggie. Phil McSweeney, thanks, Phil. How do we create good citizens? It seems to be at the heart of the world's problems, including health and mental health. How do we create good citizens? I love that Phil wants your point of view on that.
Yeah, it's an amazing question. When I started Tenor, which is giving kids 10 quid and they have a month to turn it into something, everyone says, by the way, 500,000 kids have done it now. Everyone said, oh, that's a good business competition. I said, it's not a business competition. It's an ideas competition. It's about encouraging kids to connect with people that they don't already know. My first answer, Mark, was going to be, and forgive me if this is way offbeat, how do we encourage people to look after themselves? So I've gone immediately in my mind to school, and I would be thinking more deeply about mental health, about sleep, about creating space to think, because I think so much of what leads to bad examples of citizenship is that we aren't looking after ourselves. And so it makes it very difficult to look after everybody else. I think that we need to not be afraid to celebrate, good things when we see them and point to them. I think social media is such a powerful tool for change, but too often used to speak about ourselves rather than to point to other good things. I think that party politics has a role to play, but I think overall leads to a toxic national environment. But I think we need a bigger conversation around what citizenship means. And it means looking after each other, and much bigger and equally important, looking after the planet that we're on. And I think those two are absolutely linked. If we're not caring for ourselves, we're unlikely to care for others to the fullest extent we could. And it's no surprise we end up trashing the world around us.
That, I mean, super insight there. And by the way, just so you know, some lovely comments coming through. Katja basically talks about and said that she absolutely loves the subtitle idea that you came up with there, Ollie, and I'm sure is a big supporter. Just want to pause for one moment just to basically say hi to a couple of people in the audience who we love come on every week in, week out, and really appreciate everyone who comes on. Barney, of course. Got a couple of new faces, people like Belinda, I think probably a first timer. Selena, Eileen, Finn, nice to see you on. Hannah, one of our big promoters at the School of Marketing. We've got Matt from TSB, Phil, great fan. Raju as well. Richard, week on week brand guru there. Saffron is coming on from Santander. We've got Sam. And Trina, lovely to see you again on the show as well. So thank you for joining us. Of course, we are here week in, week out, interviewing an amazing guest like Ollie every single week. So thank you for your support. It really, really means the world to us. Coming back onto it, we've got so many questions about networking, Ollie. And funny enough, when we had a session with you, our questions were very much around this because you seem to be the man in the know about these things. So Selena has got a question about networking around virtual events. She says, how do you do it? Virtual drinks, for example. What's your thoughts about virtual events?
Yeah, well, I think firstly, clearly different, and yet let's think of all the positives, right? You can drop in and out of them. You can do them in, well, certainly your slippers, if not your pajamas. You can go to virtual events anywhere in the world. So yeah, we can get bogged down on all the negatives, but let's think of the positives. Well, you can sample things from around the world. Eventbrite, I was lucky enough to interview the co-founder, Julia. So I get to host so many great events, right? So I've got a very interesting, certainly a different take on it. I host the Great British Entrepreneur Awards. Silicon Valley comes to the UK, the Scale Up Summit, all of these different things, right? So what I think is, number one, don't be afraid to sample, but realize that not everything you go to is there to advance your business and do a deal, right? It could be there to spark your brain, to learn something, to get a totally fresh perspective. When you go to Eventbrite, for example, you can have a whole array of events. You know, I was just investigating an event in Oslo last Thursday because I want to do more virtual travel this year, dipping into other countries, immersing myself, dipping into an event, setting up a 10-minute Zoom with someone in Oslo, and then off to the next country the next week, right? So use it as a license to explore would be the first thing. The second thing is, don't be afraid to introduce yourself and join the dots between platforms. What's the hashtag? Is the cliche, but actually you'll start to see a few dots joining and pinging. You two have been brilliantly vibrant across LinkedIn on this, but actually if you were to trace through the comments, you'll start to see some fascinating, as we already have done, individuals underneath those, names within the guest list. And that's when the serendipity really starts to bubble. So start to join the dots between platforms. Who commented on Mark and Richie and Jordan's posts about today's show? And does that spark an idea or a future connection because we've got people in common? Don't be afraid to be a host yourself. I've hosted dozens of virtual coffees and late night, an hour for a glass of something refreshing at 9 or 10 o'clock. Even if it's just 5 or 6 people, some of my favorite gatherings over the last 18 months have just been saying, hey, and I've announced it again last night to some people that I'm going to do a few of these over the next few weeks, just half an hour, just a bit of a coffee break. So don't be afraid to be the host yourself. Gather people without an agenda. And that's one of the most powerful things you can do at the moment. There's such a school of thought. What's the agenda? Don't have an agenda for once in your life. Much more uplifting. And then because of the business models that have been shaken to the core, so many events are becoming free, for better or worse, in the virtual world. So don't be afraid to ask permission to join something. If you see a virtual event taking place, write to the producer, write to the organizer, sorry for the cheeky request, would you mind if I joined in? So I think, and just recognize that some events are an opportunity to connect in the moment with each other. Some are more of a broadcast event and some are a bit of both. But if you sense that one could be an opportunity to connect with other people, don't just resort to treating it as a sit back broadcast opportunity, because you could be missing out on something quite useful.
Ollie, linking to your point about being a host, yeah, busted. Jordan's put a comment in saying Mark's taking notes. You know, it's good advice when that happens. I mean, I have to say, Richie and I bloody love doing this because, you know, we hopefully give a sort of a service and an inspiration to others. But, you know, we also learn a lot and are inspired ourselves. So absolutely, that's busted, but it strikes a chord what you said about being a host.
And by the way, Mark, forgive me, I'm interrupting you rudely. Sorry. Hosting shows, fantastic, but also little digital gatherings as well. I know that cut across, but yeah, no, kudos to you. It's an amazing way to meet people, not least the people in the audience. That's why that gives me a huge spring in my step.
No, point taken. You made a broader point, so 2021, tricky year, no doubt. Goals for this year and next. You know, what's next in terms of the big things you want to do in the world?
Yeah, so 3 things. I am 100% determined that we get lots of points on the board for TOTS. YouTube, Netflix have already done it. Brilliant. ITV, BBC, Sky. We've got to knock all of these down. It's going to be no doubt in my mind it's going to happen. We just can't afford to wait for another 2 years. 2 years since Henry Warren joined me on this journey. He's an amazing co-founder to drive it and do the graft. TOTS has to be a success. In 2 years' time, I want TOTS to stand for turn off the subtitles and flip it around. The second thing, I helped lead a dozen clean and cool missions, taking clean tech, green energy, scale-ups, entrepreneurs to San Francisco and Brazil and India and Bangalore. I want to see what clean and cool looks like now. It's never been more urgent to connect the innovators and the inventors who are going to solve the planet's biggest problems with the corporates and with the capital they need to succeed globally. So Clean and Cool 2 won't look like a series of trade missions. And that really excites me as a question to set myself. The third one really is, I love making powerful introductions. I love hosting events. I have a responsibility to help create platforms and environments for other people to connect. So that's the question I set myself on a regular basis. How do you create the conditions for many, many, many other people to connect and make them feel like they want to connect with other people? If I'm allowed a final one, purely cheekily, Mark, I have created my course, Build a Better Network, because it is everything I've learned in the last 20 years. And all of it is on my website, olliebarrett.com. But I genuinely, yes, of course, I want people to buy it around the world. But actually, I want to get it into the hands of people who've fallen on hard times, who can't afford it, who've lost their job, who haven't even got started in the job market. So if anyone can help me get the course to those who need it most, then I'll be very grateful. And that will genuinely make me happier than selling it to someone in Australia, which gave me great joy when that happened as well.
Totally. And look, as I said, I've been listening to it for the last couple of days and been thoroughly enjoying the experience, Ollie. So thank you for sharing that with the world. Ollie, so many questions, 4 minutes left. I'm going to do a bit of a rapid fire round, try and get through as many as I can. So please do kind of keep brief and short and sharp. So first question from Trina Smith. She hadn't heard of TOTS before. Has there been any communication to primary schools? She'd like to share it with our head. Thoughts on that very quickly?
Phase 1 of the campaign has targeted broadcasters and tech companies. Phase 2 of the campaign kicks off next month, February 2021, and will be public facing and include lots of communication with primary schools. All help gratefully received.
There you go, Trina. So please get in touch with Ollie. Great connection there already. And Trina's a lovely, lovely person. I've known her in my early stages of my career. Very, very helpful. So please do connect with Ollie. Next question from Dario. Got 3 subsequent questions. I'll ask them all at the same time. So while growing your career and dealing with self-doubt, you will realize that you now realize is counterproductive. What advice would you give to your younger self? That's question 1. Second one from Matt at TSP. Positive affirmation fosters trust and collaboration. What is your advice to change the mood in a room stuck in a negative circle? And then finally, on a bit of a similar note from Richard Brown, you're full of optimism and caring. What are you like with pessimists and those who don't care? So there we go.
Right. So what am I like with pessimists? Broadly speaking, optimism and pessimism are a waste of time, in my view, because they involve debating what the future will look like. Which you can do in the coffee shop or the pub. I don't tend to want to get bogged down in debating what the future will look like in most of my time. What I don't particularly like is negativity. And I genuinely think that's different from pessimism. What I don't like, and so I made a decision 15 years ago, I'm going to stop working with people I consider to be negative. It's probably cost me lots of money, but it's made my work far happier, right? Now, I do understand if you're within a large organization, you don't get that choice in many occasions. So I'm not great with negative people. I'm not great at all. And that's why I tend to listen to them, but avoid actually working with them. So that's a slight sort of escape route from that. I cannot emphasize enough the power of coaching and working with a coach. Something I learned from the best accelerator programs I worked with. The most valued bit of their program, in many cases, including the Marketing Academy, was often the coaching element. So for me, working alongside, even in the last year or two, and especially within the last year or two, Matt Lowry, Eric Partaker, coaches who have helped me, whether it's set goals, think more clearly, unbelievably important. I wish I'd started that 15 years earlier. And on the self-doubt, on the self-doubt, I think it's understanding that link again between physical and mental health. Every day I ask myself, if I'm feeling a bit down in the dumps, I say, have you checked your shed? Have you fixed your shed? Your sleep, your hydration, your exercise, and your diet. And almost always, the life-changing thing that in a minute you can achieve for me is have a pint of water or do 20 press-ups. I know it sounds a bit ridiculous. I'm slightly embarrassed revealing it, but even within a minute, my state of mind can change completely for the day. So those, forgive me if I'd missed one off there, Richie.
That sounds great. Thank you for that, Ollie.
But did I miss an answer there, Richie
No,
and Mark?
I think you were good. I think you've got them all.
Yeah, Richie, yeah, that's like power play, Richie. Like Bummel Ollie, 3 questions, bang.
Absolutely.
My goodness, it's 8:45. Where did that go? So probably, I think we're out of time on questions. So all that remains is to do a bit of a wrap and to thank you, Ollie. So I'll give you my reflections. So I love where we started, the generosity that you bring in terms of wanting to make life-changing introductions. The thought of the long shot connection. I love that. Forgive me for writing out of the blue. I'm going to probably be using that, Richie and I, probably to get some great guests on. The force field of your friend's cabinet and looking after yourself. I think that was a lovely thought. And of course, everyone's going to get behind TOTS and build a better network. So Ollie, huge thanks from me.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Richie. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. Those questions were really stimulating. It just shows me even more how I miss seeing people and thinking about some of the bigger questions in life. So thank you.
Pleasure,
absolute pleasure, Ollie. But I'm just not letting you get away that easy. I just want one very quick one word answer, one sentence answer for Adam Zavalis, who's got his final question here. Simply, what inspires you each day? One sentence. What's the thing?
It's easy at the moment because it's my family. I mean, I started my day yesterday doing the 4 times table to an exercise routine, thanks to BBC Bite Size. So it's like hindsight is 20/20, and so 10/4 as it turns out. But so I would say in my family, I just think, honestly, Richie, it's the sense of possibility for the millions of connections which haven't been made yet. And yeah, I know that sounds terribly cheesy. You started it with the sunshine hoodie, I think. It might have got me there. But genuinely, we go through, I'm going to shut up within less than a minute. We go through school being told that strangers are dangerous. That's to protect kids. There has to come a point when the reveal is made that strangers are not dangerous. They're people we haven't met yet, and the world is full of amazing connections waiting to be made. And I find that hugely uplifting, and it really puts a spring in my step. If I can help others to do it, then I'll be very happy.
But you know, Ollie, you've certainly put a spring in our step this morning. So really, thank you so much for your time. It's been absolutely inspirational, really practical as well. I've taken away so much around the tips that I need to do coming forward in the next couple of weeks from a virtual perspective to meet more people, forge great connections, and get behind some of those great vision that you've got for some of the initiatives. So I would love to be in touch on that as well to see how we can help through that process. But all for now, just want to say a massive thanks, Ollie, and massive thanks to everyone for tuning in this Friday morning.
Yeah, just before we go, and Richie, you are relentless. I loved how you got that last one in there. But just as a heads up for next week, so we have Mark Joblin, who I've known for a number of years, one of the most experienced marketers in the UK. I think if I get it right, she's worked at Unilever, Cadbury's, Birdseye, Sara Lee, British Gas, then Centrica, and now at NatWest, which is quite interesting because NatWest binned the CMO role and then brought it back, and Mark's taken that role. She's a lovely lady, great company, razor sharp, but very, very humble. So tune in at 8 o'clock next week for that show. But for now, thanks again, Ollie. It's been brilliant this morning. Lovely to have you on, and good weekends, everybody. Have a good one.